Look at 49 people. Good morning and welcome to this webinar. My name is Osman Seedat, the Deputy Dean at Region Business School. It's my pleasure to be the host or moderator of this morning's webinar relating to ethics in the public and private sector. The purpose of this webinar is to explore the notions of ethics in contemporary business and the public and private sectors. Okay, I think we'll be looking forward to some interesting discussions today. And so you are welcome once again to what is the last in our series of webinars in 2022. But be assured that this will continue in 2023, and we look forward to your continued support and participation. I want to make a special welcome to our speakers today, Ms. Ragiema Thokan-Mohamed, and my colleague, Mr. Avinesh Seetharam. You're all welcome. I will talk to you again just now before I'll give you more details about our speakers just now. But again, I want to say thank you for joining us. And our program today is that each speaker will be given a slot and an allotted time, and after which we will have a session for questions from the floor. You can type in your questions using the chat function or the Q&A function, and we'll endeavor to get responses to your question. If you've got a specific question for one of the speakers, please specify, but I can put the question to both the speakers if that's needed. All right, also that there'll be a recording of this webinar, which will be available on YouTube. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker today. Our first speaker, Ragiema Thokan-Mohamed, is an ethics officer with the Ethics Institute of South Africa. She's also a legal professional who's been practicing for at least the last 15 years. She has been a legal ethics and compliance executive at the South African Institute of Professional Accountants, SAIPA, and she's also an academic. So we've got a very interesting speaker today. Her areas of expertise are about implementing ethics policies and devising ethical strategies. So, Ragiema, I'll ask you then to go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan, and thank you for the very warm welcome. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a short presentation for you. This was a very hot topic, and I had to condense everything I wanted to say into a very short time. So I apologize if I don't hit all the points, but I hope that you're going to enjoy and start thinking about what's happening in this country that we love so much, South Africa. So the first thing I want to discuss is the state of ethics in our nation. Now, I often wonder what the ancient philosophers would say about the state of ethics in our nation. Let's take Aristotle, for instance. He had this golden mean philosophy. He provided a virtue and a vice, and he said that if we want to be ethical, we need to find the middle path in order to be considered morally correct. So for instance, if you witness a robbery, you aren't expected to be a hero if that means there's going to be harm done unto you. But you can't stand back and be a coward either. So you need to assess the situation, and you need to find that golden mean. So get the help necessary or help without getting harmed yourself. Now let's look at what that means in the South African context. So we pay our taxes, and those taxes are supposed to be used to build and fix our schools, keep the electricity on, the water flowing. Now, it's all great when they do what they're supposed to, but sometimes they add extra stuff. So our national highway used to be concrete, and I see there's still some areas that have concrete, but in Gauteng, a lot of the highways have been tarred. Now that's great, they did their jobs, excellent, we love that. But then they added these purple/violet gantries every 10 kilometers. That wasn't necessary because Right now, we're paying double. We're paying more. Funny thing is, I read in the news recently that they're doing away with these gantries. Why? I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with the upcoming elections. So yes, they fixed the road, they fill the obligation, but this additional expense, where is the middle ground? Maybe Trevor Noah was right when he said, the whole world goes one way and in South Africa, we'll meet you there. I believe that we should learn from our history, but the trick is not to use resources of our nation to serve only a privileged minority. Rather, how can we ensure that the majority is catered for and that there's a better standard of living for all who live in the country? Do you think that Thomas Hobbes, another philosopher, was correct when he said that we require a benevolent ruler to ensure that our social contract exists? You see, he was of the opinion that man alone cannot act in a manner that will be beneficial to all those around him unless there were rules in place and a wise leader in charge, ensuring that these rules were obeyed, or else we'd fall into utter chaos. Many say this about states that were prosperous yet led to dictators. But is it correct to say that we have to trade our freedom for services? Let's look at the South African context. We experience a pandemic. Our noble leader gives us the National Coronavirus Command Council. They look at various solutions from all over the world, and their decision is that we need to go into a hard lockdown. At this point, I'm thinking, yes, South Africa, yes, Jeremy Bentham would be ecstatic, because this is a true example of the utilitarian principle. But then money starts pouring in from all and sundry, 500 million, I think. And then, just like the manifest plane, it vanishes. Where did the money go to? As a citizen, I'm trusting you with my life, and you can't trace what happened to the money? How naive do you think we are? Leadership has the most important role to play in ethics. They set the tone on the top, and through their actions or inaction, those who report to them develop a certain type of culture. We do things a certain way, and we accept certain actions. We rationalize, minimize, and justify to make ourselves feel better. Why is it okay for someone to ignore a court date and then rally supporters to loot an otherwise peaceful town? Professor Bob Garrett, who wrote a book on corporate governance called The Fish Rots from the Head, he speaks about this old Chinese proverb, and what it indicates is that the country and companies can be traced back to its leadership. The culture underpins everything. It defines what is and what is not acceptable. We have become so conditioned to accepting the status quo that we have failed Socrates, the father of ethics. He would demand that we question until you understand. Question how 500 million went missing. Question why a flagpole costs 22 million. Question why SAA keeps going under business rescue. We have become too complacent. You might just be, you say things like, what can I do? I'm just one person. But what if you are the right person in the right position to do something? You might just be that person to make the difference. So, I often think, what would the world be like without professional accountants? I mean, the finance gurus and the financial guys, you guys make the economy run so efficiently. Without you, we'd fail. I recently Googled, what is the most dangerous profession in the world? And the ones that came up were construction work and fishing and hunting. And yes, I agree, those are dangerous. But I think Google's wrong. Yes, I am the person who argues with the calculator and the one who always wants to test the limit. I think a good professional accountant, one that follows the rules, their lives hang in the balance. They have a responsibility to speak up, and that could be fatal. Let's learn a little bit more about how we should be thinking, how we should be making good ethical decisions. If my video doesn't work, I'm going to switch over to YouTube. Okay, let me stop share. I apologize. Share my screen and this thing is testing me today. Let me do this. Okay, found it. Now I just have to share it. So there are lots of videos out there, but I thought this one was a cool one because it actually tells you about good ethical decision making and how to do that.
Think about the last time you made a big decision. Why did you make that choice? What made you choose one way rather than picking any of the other options available to you? There was a time when the answer to this question seemed simple, a time when we thought that people were entirely rational. Now, we know that decision-making is more like an iceberg. So much of the activity happens beneath the surface. To feel confident about your choices, it helps to be aware of 4 key drivers of decision-making. First, there are our unconscious thoughts. Our minds are designed to process huge amounts of information at extremely high speeds. They do this by using heuristics, like little mental shortcuts. These shortcuts help us to manage our complicated world efficiently. But there can be negative side effects of this thinking, distortions to our decision-making. For example, some heuristics function as biases. They can lead us to discriminate against people unfairly or ignore ideas that don't support our way of thinking. Second, there is unthinking custom and practice. Our families, societies, workplace, cultural backgrounds and friendships all carry sets of beliefs about what's right and wrong. We can easily absorb these beliefs without ever stopping to ask ourselves, do I agree with these beliefs? Are they valid? Third, there is our personal, ethical decision-making profile. People tend to have default settings they use when making decisions. Maybe you tend to think about outcomes. Perhaps you prioritize relationships in your decision-making. Each profile has strengths, but also weaknesses. These weaknesses can be our downfall, leading us to fail to consider other important ethical issues. Finally, and most importantly, there's reflective practice. This is the mode of conscious decision-making. It considers context and the people who will be affected by a decision. It's guided by our purpose, values, and principles, and exercises our imagination to think about what solutions might be possible. We like to think that this form of decision-making is our go-to. In reality, we're probably driven far more heavily by the first 3 drivers of decision-making. That's why ethics, the conscious practice of making and justifying our decisions, is so important. It's too easy to be led astray if we don't take the time to become familiar with our minds, our personal history, and our preferred ways of making decisions. If we can't admit our potential to make bad decisions, we'll struggle to make good ones. Make choices that reflect what's good and right, choices you can justify, and ones you can be proud of. That's what makes the choices actively yours.
Okay, so let's go back to my presentation. I'll share it now. All right. Okay. Where are we? There we are. Okay, so while I'm getting the presentation on, I have a question for you. What would you do if you found a 200 Rand note on the floor? Would you pick it up and take it and say, yes, find us keepers? Or would you be of the opinion that it's not mine? I can't pick it up. You can put your answer in the chat. Now, apart from those conscious, unconscious ethical decisions we make all the time, some of us are also ruled by our religious beliefs. Do you know that in my religion, I'm not allowed to pick up the 200 Rand notes? Because if I do, I have to find out who the owner is. And honestly, I don't want that responsibility. Now, I can change that dynamic a little bit. And I can say that, what if it is a more desperate situation? What if I need formula for my son? And the only money around is that 200 Rand note on the floor. What do I do? Now, there is something called survival ethics. And yes, I'm going to be accountable if I do pick it up. But ultimately, your conscience guides you. So I'm going to do a conscience exercise with you towards the end, and I'm almost there. I'm just waiting for my presentation to say hi to me again, and then we can continue. You know, in the week, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I had a discussion with my students, and I said, because I was a little late for a class, and I said, why is it that Metro decides that they want to have roadblocks on the same day that we have load shedding? Like, why can't they just move the traffic or direct the traffic? That would be better for us. And then I joked and I said, you know, one day they're probably going to come with yokos to people who pay bribes. And if you don't have cash on you, just tell you to tap. And as I'm giggling, a student raises her hand and she says, but ma'am, they don't ask for that. They ask if you have a cell phone, you can just do an e-wallet quickly because a yoko costs money. I was stumped. I didn't know what to say. So things are moving along in South Africa. I see we use technology for the best. Sometimes to our own benefit. So I'm trying to share this presentation. Let's see if it's working. Okay, it looks like it is. Let's make it big. Okay, I'm trying to go on to whistleblowing. But my presentation is giving me issues, so we're just going to improvise. Now, what I'm asking of you when I ask you to think about good decision making is I want you in your personal and professional capacity to try to always do the right thing. Find that golden mean, even if it means being a whistleblower. Those brave enough to sacrifice everything to do the right thing. Now, I was going to show you a picture of Edward Snowden, and I'm sure most of you know who he is. He was the person who decided that he was going to blow the lid on surveillance that was being done illegally. If you really want to watch more about that, I think it's available on one of either Netflix or something, so you can watch the Snowden video. But he had to go into hiding. It wasn't easy for him. And I used that example before, but now we have a better one. It's very sad, but it's a better example because it's more current, it's more South African. I don't know if you've heard about Babita Deokaran. She was the acting chief financial officer at the Gauteng Provincial Government Department of Health. She was gunned down last year. Yes, she was assassinated on the 23rd of August. She was going to expose a syndicate set up to benefit from state corruption, which involved COVID-19, PPE, procurement scandals, and the value was 332 million in the Gauteng Provincial Department of Health. She was on special leave for a long while, like almost a year, and then she was put under witness protection, but it wasn't good enough. They still gunned her down. Just because you decide to do the right thing doesn't mean that everybody's going to be happy with your decision. Whistleblowing is a lonely and stressful process, and only for the brave. So, even after I tell you to become an endangered species, financial services people, I want you to consider the following. Have you ever seen what happens to fruit when it's in a bowl and one fruit starts rotting? The rot spreads across to all the other fruit. Now, I need you to be something more than just a fruit in the bowl. I need you to have a special coating, like a toffee apple, a glistening, bright coating around yourself to protect yourself from the rot, but also to inspire others to do better and to always do the right thing. So you can't just shrug your shoulders and say, not my monkey, not my circus. You have to be the toffee apple that inspires others to do the right thing through your actions and never forgo your principles. Be relentless. So in conclusion, I want you to find your conscience with me. I was going to put up on the screen, but my presentation is a little bit wonky right now. So I want you to close your eyes, and I'm going to mention a few things. And when you do that, when I do that, I want you to tell me in the chat where you feel it in your body, where your conscience lies, because it's not like it's at the heart, it's in the head. It's different for everybody. So the first thing I'm going to mention when you close your eyes and you want to focus here is the Steinhoff saga. How did you feel about that? If you were a government employee and you were told that, oops, your pension fund is gone, how would you feel about that? Deloitte failed in doing what they were supposed to, in picking up these accounting cooked books, and everybody's okay with it? How about MTN? When they defied the Nigerian legislation, it wasn't MTN, oh, that telecommunications company, it was MTN, that South African company. Yes, they lost 20% in their share price in a few months when that scandal hit and they got a huge fine. But is that good enough? Can we just let it go because they paid the fine? What about Nkandla? Who needs a fire pool, guys? And I hope I get the numbers right here and not be like the owner of Nkandla. Apparently, we spent 2,446,631. Oh my God, I have totally been just like him right now. It's 246 million. Let's just round it off. 246 million on Nkandla. I also want a fire pool. How about land expropriation without compensation? Section 25 of our Constitution states that we have the right to be compensated. Why take that away from us? In 100 years, my progeny is going to cry and scream and say, I also want that because you took it away from my mom or my great-great-great-grandmother, right? And then finally, do you know that the flagpole team in their budget added that they need to travel to other countries so that they could learn how to erect this flagpole? Wow, that's a special budget. How did all of those make you feel? Where did you feel it? That's your conscience. I want you to exercise it every day. If it's under your armpit, do the chicken dance. Wherever it is, exercise it, because that's going to remind you to be a better person. That's going to remind you to find the golden mean. So I ask you, I beg of you, stay objective, remain independent, and always be a toffee apple. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Ragiema. There are one or two questions, but we'll hold the questions until we have Avinesh speak. I just want to tell you that in response to the issue about finding 200 Rand, we have two responses. One says that I'll pick it up and find the owner. And the other says, if no one lays claim to the 200 Rand note, then I don't want someone else who needs to buy ammunition for his firearm to pick it up, so I will take it. Well, that's what I'm assuming anyway. Okay, thank you so much again. And please put your questions using the Q&A or the chat function. Thank you, Ria, for your comments, and we'll get to your question just now. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce my colleague, Avinesh Seetharam. He's a chartered accountant. and a certified internal auditor. He has over 25 years experience with a skill set that is really multidisciplinary. He's currently the head of school in our of finance and accounting at Region Business School, and his wide experience also ranges from auditing and finance at a managerial level in a listed company, as well as being a senior auditing lecturer at a public higher education institution. So without further ado, I'll call on my colleague Avinesh to talk to you.
Thank you, Prof, and good day to everybody. My discussion is going to be threefold: the importance of ethics in the profession, and how can ethical behavior be instilled in the profession. And the last part I'm going to speak about is the role of higher education institutions in shaping ethical behavior. So in terms of the importance of ethics in the profession, it comes down to the professional concerned. And basically, the professional needs to ensure that they need to abide by the ethical code of conduct by the professional body to which they are associated with. And if they are employed in a company, then they should abide by the company's business code of ethics in that sense. So what it basically means is that one's conduct and decisions taken must ensure that these are within the umbrella of the general or the ethics code holistically. Right? And the reason why it's important is that there are huge reputation risks attached to unethical behavior. And as a professional, one should safeguard against negative impact of reputation. One needs to also understand that the negative impacts of reputation does relate to the profession directly, a professional concern. Now, depending on the circumstances, it also affects many other stakeholders. The common and immediate stakeholders that come to mind are obviously the professional body that the professional is associated with, the company where the professional is actually employed in, if he's employed in a company, and any other party that's been involved in any act that could lead to unethical behavior. And everybody knows that the consequences of unethical behavior is actually very, very serious, because it could result in dismissal, loss of income, dispute to the professional body, amongst others. And in terms of building and maintaining a good reputation, it is critical that one does that, and one needs to remember that it takes years to develop. But if something happens, it actually is destroyed in a flash. So the reality is that it would take many years to rebuild a good reputation, given that you may have a scar for life, should you be found guilty of misconduct or unethical behavior or anything of that sort. With regards to the second part of it, in terms of how can ethical behavior be instilled in the profession, the starting point to that question is with the individual concerned. Right? The individual basically needs to revisit their own morals and own values and align those morals and values to that of the professional code of conduct from a professional perspective, as well as from a work point of view. And one needs to also remember that as a professional, no matter where you are in the hierarchy, you are a professional. You basically you're a leader in your own right, and you should accordingly lead by example, right? And also reinforce good codes of conduct amongst your colleagues in your workplace. So if each and every individual practices good ethical behavior, then collectively the impact will be great. And from an employer's perspective, an employer should basically ensure that there's ongoing training on ethical behavior in terms of what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, and what are the processes that should be followed in terms of dealing with unethical behavior and things like that. Now, from an employer's point of view, it's also important to be transparent with this whole issue of ethics and ethical behavior. And there must be ongoing feedback and reporting to all the associates and employees within a company in terms of the state of ethical climate within an organization. And from a professional body's perspective, professional bodies should ramp up with a whole lot of training that should be provided to professionals on topical areas, and provide the relevant guidance to the relevant members of the profession. And the last part of it I want to speak about is the role of higher education institutions with regards to shaping ethical behavior. Now, from an academic's point of view, the academic, as we all know, that they are the ones that are interacting with students on an ongoing basis. So it's important for them to transfer across the knowledge from what they have to the students in terms of where does their future lie in terms of what they are studying within the institution and what they are actually heading for after their studies in terms of their career and so on. Right? And it basically should start off from very, very basic levels. And it should start off from real examples. And I just want to touch on, and actually Ragiema had taken my example, but I have to repeat it, but just that my example about a real life situation, regardless of whether you're a professional or not. If you find a wallet with cash and valuables inside, so the question is, what is the right thing to do? Right? So from an academic point of view, academics should start off with something basic like that, and thereafter move on and shift towards the academic side of it. So for example, what is academic integrity? So what does it mean for a student? What does it mean for a student who actually is cheating in an exam? And what are the consequences of that in terms of the student's current studies as well as future studies in the institution? And then the last part of this aspect in terms of an academic would be to actually inculcate or integrate professionalism in that, or related to the chosen career or career path of study, right? And in terms of what program they have chosen to study. So for example, in auditing, so bring it to the actual content of what the student is actually studying towards. So in auditing, for example, is that we talk about something of being objective. That means an auditor needs to be objective and independent in terms of giving an opinion in terms of the audit report. So what does it mean if an auditor lacks that independence, lacks that objectivity? So what does it mean for the people that receive that report and place reliance on the report? So there's obviously a question mark to that. And here at the School of Finance and Accounting, we have an ethics module in each and every program that we actually offer from our school. And we basically integrate the program in terms of the approach that I've actually just mentioned to you just now. Now, in addition to this, in the remaining modules of the programs, we take ethics, we integrate it with the module content, and we describe that or discuss that with students to get their input. So that integration is actually important because we try and integrate it with the various subject matter in those various modules. So in closing, I would like to say that collectively, if everybody does their bit in terms of ethics, collectively, we can basically assist and help rebuild a better South Africa for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Avinesh.
Thanks.
And thanks again to both our speakers in terms of the time they made for us today. So there are a number of questions on the Q&A. Let's start with those first. And there's some comments as well. Okay, Titus. All right, so let's start with the first one. And I think it's something that Avinesh, you did teach. Anonymous wants to know about, and let me put it to Ragiema. Is ethics something that you can teach? Can ethics be taught? Sorry, you just unmute yourself, Ragiema.
Maaf. Okay, so if I believe that ethics couldn't be taught, then I'd be out of a part-time job, I suppose. Ethics is something that, yes, you grow up, mom and dad teach you stuff. You go to school, and all of a sudden your friends from their backgrounds teach you things, and you take a little bit of everything as you go along, and that becomes your personal ethics. But it changes over time. So I believe that, yes, ethics can be taught. And if you have the right role models and the right guidance, that you can get to where you need to be. And I think it's very important, like Avinesh says, you need to look, if you are a finance professional, you need to look at the code of conduct. You need to know what is expected of you, because professional ethics is where you're going to spend the rest of your life. Okay, so yes, ethics can be taught, and you are right, they should include the auditing firms in it. I think Avinesh can answer more on that if he wants.
Thank you. Avinesh?
I think, yes, it can be taught. And again, we learn every day, because at the end of the day, we've got the code of conduct in a company. If you are employed in a company, we've got the code of conduct in a professional capacity, and you've got your own personal morals and values. So we need to bring all that together and assess it in terms of those various codes and say, am I doing the right thing? Always question yourself. Am I doing the right thing? And if you are in doubt, I would always advise anybody to ask your seniors and get advice. So yes, it can be taught. Everybody that may not know the answers to everything, but yes, you've got people that can assist you with that. And every time you do something, and obviously you are learning from the experience, but it starts off with basic stuff.
So
Thanks.
Thank you, Avinesh. Yeah, so the question that arises out of that, and I'll get to the other question just now, is how do I ensure, Ragiema, that I do the right thing? Because do we go by our own personal values? Do we succumb to some kind of hazy view of what society will want? And is there such a thing as a universal right? And linked to that, you said ethics and changes. They are not fixed principles. So how does that all tie in?
Okay, so now you're speaking about ethics in the law, because there's different concepts.
Okay, no, well, just about ethics. Is there a fixed universal right? So, for example,
a lot of religions have this: treat others as you'd want to be treated. That you find across various religions. I think that could be a universal right. I think the way to determine it is, if you're going to go purely on religion, then you follow your religion. If you're going to look at the ancient philosophers and you're going to decide, I'm going to follow eudaimonism, I'm going to be utilitarian, but then you must be a purist in that. You must follow it to the letter. So you can't decide one day you're waking up and you're going to do what Aristotle did, and then the next day you're going to be like, oh no, let me just be selfish today because it's all about me. So you have to be consistent in your decisions. And if you are that way, then eventually you program yourself to do the right thing.
So Shyam Bhatta also asked that question. What's better, the right thing to do or the best thing?
My question is, the best thing for who? I would say it's for the greater good. If it's for other people and the right thing for everybody, then it still becomes the right thing, becomes the best thing. But if it's just about me, that's a little bit selfish.
Thank you. Okay, so Julia relates a story about how she found 1,000 rand and traced the owners, and she believes that that was the best thing that happened in terms of what she did. But Solly has a question about what does he do, or what happens when you discover that the salary you are earning is not the salary as per what was agreed to. Not sure what the ethical issue there is, but maybe you can help.
Are you looking at knowing what the contract was? That sometimes people get paid a certain amount in order to procure other people, and then you find out at the end of the day you're getting paid half of that. I don't know what the.
I think it's related to that.
I would follow a NOCLA principle. I would be like, I'm going to the senior, and I would make a noise about it, because it actually becomes an employee issue, and you want your employees to be happy. So as an employer, which most of your members, I think at some point might become managers because of the type of things they're studying, I think they need to be open to listening to what the employees have to say, and not shutting them down, and then finding solutions that work. Or maybe he's thinking about getting too much money, getting overpaid. Must he just keep quiet about it, or what must he do? That one is a bit vague.
No, thank you. There's a comment from Sudhiran that says ethics is more of a behavior than a skill. And I think I agree with that. But again, a question from Kaledi. How do we teach ethics to people who are perhaps so forced in, so comfortable or in their jobs that, they don't see anything wrong?
So I'd like to answer that together with Ria Pillai's question, because the whole thing is about how do you get ethics compliance and people to jump onto this whole ethics culture and having a good ethics culture in your organization. And it involves top management making a decision and saying, yes, this is the way we're going. And you have to make ethics fun. People don't like rules. When you listen to compliance and you think of that department, you're like, oh my gosh, can they just leave me alone? It's like when the auditor visits you, you don't know what to say, you get on your nerves. But if you make ethics fun, if you bring industrial theater into it, if you have little reminders, cute reminders that you're giving out, and you have these like coffee workshops where people are free to say what they want, it's a safe space. Have a whistleblowing line. Make sure that in your KPAs, when you're giving bonuses, you give points for people doing good ethical stuff or coming up with ethical solutions. When we make ethics part of the way we run our business, then we're speaking about good ethics and a good ethical culture. So going back down to that question from, I think it was, I can't see it now. Sorry, the one you asked now about, I just can't see it on my screen.
Yes, no, that's, I moved on to the next one.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, again, just to see it there. So here's the thing, Bongani asks, how do you balance between personal ethics and business as an entrepreneur? And before you answer that, this whole thing about this paradox, is there such a thing as business ethics? Because there's a view that says it's almost a contradiction in terms, that in order to be successful in business, well, and that's a relative definition what success is. Can you be ethical at the same time? So Bongani wants to know, how do you balance personal ethics and business as an entrepreneur?
You must try your absolute utmost to make them become one, because your personal ethics is eventually going to shine through in all your business dealings. Don't be that cousin who always, everybody just knows, oh my gosh, he's going to catch on to something he's not supposed to, because we know where his ethics lies. You need to align your personal ethics with your business ethics. And when you're talking about businesses, they have values. They don't have a conscience yet, but they have values. And they know what they want to instill in the employees. So when you're hiring people, you know what the CV says, they're already qualified. You now need to say, test them on their ethical conscience. You need to check if their ethics aligns with your business. But yes, I think as an entrepreneur, it's difficult because sometimes you're a one-man show. I think you need to get those two to align. Then you'll find success.
So Bunga and Rusha have a similar type of comment or question. How to deal with political influence, and although there's so many guidelines like the King reports, why is it not happening? Why is governance still an issue?
Because the people on the top are not taking it seriously enough. They're the only ones that can fix it. If, for instance, your first line manager is very political, whenever they are making decisions, it's always going for one particular party, they're going to supply us with this, etc., etc. But you have to look at the board, and those are the custodians. If the board knows that we don't care what the affiliation is towards whatever political party, and they enforce those policies, then at least through a whistleblowing line or going and reporting your manager to the person above them, that way you can try to eliminate politics. But it just depends on the culture of the organization. It's very difficult. We have to make those changes or else we're not going to see them.
And Julia asks about ethics in recruitment. Any general thoughts on that?
Maybe Avinesh can take this because I've been taking all of them. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, Avinesh.
I think when it comes to recruitment, we need to be honest, we need to be fair. right? And we need to know exactly what is it in that person's CV and what the person can actually do or can't do in an organization. So I think, when it comes to recruitment, you have to be honest and you have to be fair from the agency side, as well as from the so-called employee that's actually looking for work. And you know what, at the end of the day, an employee is actually looking for somebody with certain amount of skill set. So it's no use deceiving an employer for a job.
I think the issue was really relating to perhaps some forms of nepotism, as well as perhaps appointing people rather than the best candidate, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
I read that in Canada, every one of their ministers are actually educated with PhDs, etc., for the position that they hold. And I thought, wow, imagine we had that in South Africa, like real degrees, not people saying, I have this, and then when you really follow up, there's nothing there. So yeah, I think we need to strive towards something like that, where we have the right people in the right places, not because of who they are.
So Telefani talks about the old issue about something may be legal, but not necessarily ethical and not in the best interests of the masses. So how do you respond there?
So ethics and law are not the same thing, and it takes the law a very long time to actually catch up with ethics. The best example is the apartheid. I mean, we had laws in place that are keeping people out of certain areas for what? Because the law said so, but was it right? So the law is supposed to represent what public policy is. And eventually it will change. Like, for instance, an example is like abortion. Abortion wasn't allowed a few years ago. Now it's allowed because people have changed the idea. So we need to be louder. We need to check on what Parliament is doing. We need to give commentary when they ask for it. And we need to tell them what our ethics is, or put the right people in charge, or the right people, when we have the right to vote, take up that challenge and put the right person in place so that they could be representative of us.
So, thank you. So Barbara asks about, thanks Barbara for saying it's a great session, but she talks about whistleblowers and the fact that you put your life in danger if you are a whistleblower or you think you want to blow the whistle on something. And should you not rather just be quiet? The question that I have relating to that is whistleblowing ethical?
Yes, I think it is. I think it's a very important mechanism for ethics to survive. We need transparency. We need to know what is happening so that we can make the proper changes, especially in the professional accounting space. I mean, you guys have that NOCLA thing. You have to let somebody know if something wrong is happening. If you keep quiet, you're also to blame. So yeah, you have to speak up. I know it's difficult, but doing the right thing is difficult.
Yeah. So Patrick wants to know is being ethical a moral and societal value?
Is being ethical and moral a societal value?
Is being ethical a moral and societal value? Is it a value?
Okay, that's a difficult one because values form part of ethics. So ethics is not the value. The value is integrity. The value is something that we hold dear, even honesty. But that all makes up ethics, if that makes sense.
So the so-called lack of a moral foundation, Devi asked this question, is the lack of ethics responsible for that sort of a lack of a moral foundation? And maybe those are related.
I think it is our inability to take it seriously that causes the issue. I think if Avinesh can just answer this, then I can just mute.
Yes, Avinesh. The question relates to, again, and there's one from Mojaki. What strategies must I use to remain true to my values and principles when I'm challenged or tested?
Oh, wow, that's a bit of, I can always say that you need to sit back as an individual and say, am I doing the right thing? What's in my conscience, right? And if you are struggling with this, then there's always advice to be sought. And I think, you need to one needs to really get advice to take the right course of action, and in terms of deciding right from wrong. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Bernadette brings back the question about can there be an ethical war? War and ethics. She poses the question, can a war be ethical?
I think we are fighting an ethics war at the moment. It's a matter of deciding, do I want to do the right thing or the easy thing? So yes, I would say we are currently in an ethical war, and I don't know when that's going to end. I just hope that there's not going to be bullets flying.
Yeah, Benjamin, I think your question was answered. Your personal ethics shouldn't clash with your business ethics. It should be one. Yeah, Christine makes a comment that we won't be able to instill or change the ethical culture until we provide whistleblowers with protection.
I would agree with that statement. There's currently a couple of people and groups that are lobbying towards giving us better witness protection and looking into the Whistleblowing Act so that it really helps those who are trying to do the right thing.
Thank you. I'm not sure if there's any more questions, people. Please put them onto the chat. Yeah, Lovemore says thank you for trying to separate ethics from values, because we get lost sometimes between the two. I'm not sure if there's any further questions, or yes, some on the chat, on the Q&A. Devi says thanks for the webinar. Okay, and Devi also agrees with your comment on war and ethics. Thank you again to our speakers. Thanks to our technical people in terms of the background. Oh, there was a comment, I remember, sorry, from my colleague Hussein regarding gray areas. Hussein, you want to put that notion forward? No. Oh, yes. So Hussein, I'm not sure what happened to him. It says gray areas can often be deceiving. So we need to take a step back in terms of being aware and trusting our ethical outlook. Yeah. Thanks again for all the comments regarding the session. It's been referred to as an eye-opening and a great session. So grateful for that. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year in terms of our webinar series. Thanks very much to our speakers today, Ragiema and Avinesh. And as I said, for the people behind the scenes who made all of this happen. Keep well, everybody, and all the best for the end of the year and for the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.